They say family is supposed to be your foundation, the people who stand by you no matter what. But what happens when the one person you trusted most rips everything away from you and leaves you with nothing? If someone had told me years ago that my own brother would betray me in the worst way possible, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a cruel way of revealing the truth. Daniel and I were born into wealth. Our father, Richard Montgomery, was a self-made man who built his fortune from the ground up. He was the kind of man people admired. Sharp, relentless, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. He raised us with the belief that nothing in life came for free, and that if we wanted success, we had to earn it. I respected him for that, even if he was a hard man to love sometimes. He wasn't the affectionate type, but he provided for us in ways most people could only dream of. Growing up, Daniel and I were close. He was my older brother by 4 years, my protector, my mentor. I idolized him. He had a way of making everything seem effortless. School, sports, socializing. People gravitated toward him. He had our father's charm, that natural ability to command a room. I, on the other hand, was always the quiet one, the planner, the one who thought things through before acting. I never resented Daniel for his easy charisma. If anything, I admired him for it. When our father died, it felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. It was sudden, a heart attack that took him without warning. 1 minute he was there, the next he was gone. I was still drowning in grief when Daniel called me to a meeting with our father's lawyer to discuss the will. I didn't think much of it. In my mind, everything would be split equally between us. Our father had always treated us the same, had always emphasized fairness. It never crossed my mind that Daniel would have other plans. I remember sitting in that cold, sterile office, the air heavy with silence. Eleanor, the lawyer who had worked with our father for years, slid the will across the desk. I scanned the pages, my eyes blurring with confusion. Everything, the house, the bank accounts, the business, had been left to Daniel. Not a single cent for me. My stomach twisted as I looked up at him, expecting some kind of explanation. But Daniel only leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Dad changed the will a few months before he passed, he said, his voice eerily calm. He thought you were too irresponsible to handle money. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. That doesn't make any sense, I whispered. He never said anything about this. He always treated us equally. Why would he do this? Daniel shrugged, his eyes cool and detached. I guess he changed his mind. I turned to Eleanor, hoping for some kind of intervention, but she only nodded solemnly. The documents are legally binding, Sophia. Your father was of sound mind when he made these changes. I'm sorry. Sorry. That was all she had to say. Sorry, as if that word could erase the years of love and trust I had put into my family. Sorry, as if it could undo the fact that my own brother had just robbed me of everything I had ever known. I tried to fight it. I hired lawyers, demanded explanations, begged Daniel to tell me the truth. But he had covered his tracks well. Every document was in order, every signature verified. It was airtight. I had no proof that he had manipulated our father into changing the will, and without proof, I had nothing. Daniel didn't even have the decency to pretend to care. He moved into our family estate as if it had always belonged to him, while I was left scrambling to figure out how to survive. I had never felt so small, so disposable. My own flesh and blood had discarded me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. In the months that followed, I struggled to keep my head above water. I had no safety net, no inheritance to fall back on. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to afford rent on a tiny rundown apartment. I went from living in luxury to barely scraping by. Meanwhile, Daniel flourished. He traveled the world, bought expensive cars, surrounded himself with people who fed his ego. He paraded his success like a trophy, never once looking back at the sister he had left behind. But life has a funny way of balancing the scales. What Daniel didn't know was that karma has a long memory, and years later, when I had finally rebuilt my life from nothing, when I had proven to myself that I didn't need my family's fortune to thrive, I would learn the truth, and that truth would change everything. Eleanor reached out to me out of the blue one afternoon. I hadn't spoken to her since the reading of the will, and hearing her voice after all these years sent a jolt of unease through me. She asked to meet, said it was important. I almost refused, but something in her tone stopped me. I met her in a small cafe, the kind of place Daniel wouldn't be caught dead in. She looked older, wearier than I remembered. There was a sadness in her eyes that unsettled me. Without preamble, she slid a folder across the table. "I should have come forward with this years ago," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but you need to know the truth." My hands trembled as I opened the folder, and there, staring back at me, was the proof I had spent years searching for. The will had been forged. Daniel had stolen everything from me, and now, after all these years, his world was finally crumbling around him. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. I stared at the documents, my breath hitching as my eyes raced over the damning evidence. It was all there, every forged signature, every manipulated clause, every carefully constructed lie. Daniel had orchestrated the entire thing, and Eleanor, she had known. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms. "Why are you telling me this now?" My voice was low, controlled, but inside, I was burning. Eleanor sighed, running a tired hand through her graying hair. "Because I can't live with it anymore. When your father died, Daniel approached me. He had connections, powerful ones, and he made it clear that if I spoke out, my career, my entire life would be ruined. At the time, I was too afraid to fight him. But I can't keep carrying this secret, Sophia. You deserve to know." I closed the folder, pressing my hands against the cool surface of the table, trying to steady the fury rising inside me. "Where is he now?" Eleanor hesitated, as if debating whether to say more. Then she exhaled sharply. "Daniel's lost everything. The business crumbled under his greed. He made bad investments, took risks he shouldn't have. The people who once fawned over him turned their backs the second the money ran out. He's drowning in debt, facing multiple lawsuits. From what I hear, he's barely scraping by." A slow, cold satisfaction unfurled inside me. Life had finally caught up to him. I leaned back in my chair, processing everything. For years I had fought to let go of my anger, to move forward, and I had. Without wealth, without privilege, without anyone's help, I had rebuilt my life from the ashes Daniel left me in. But now, I had a choice. I could expose him, drag his name through the mud, make him suffer the way he had made me suffer, or I could walk away, knowing that fate had already done the job for me. But I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. I needed to see him. Eleanor scribbled an address on a napkin. "If you want closure, you'll find him here." I took it without hesitation. "Closure," I murmured, more to myself than to her. I wasn't sure if that was what I was looking for, but one way or another, I was going to get it. I drove in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The address Eleanor had given me led to a part of town I barely recognized. Run-down buildings, flickering streetlights. The kind of place Daniel once would have sneered at. I parked in front of a crumbling apartment complex, the paint peeling from its walls, trash piled up near the entrance. It was a far cry from the sprawling estate we had grown up in, the kind of wealth that ensured we never had to wonder where our next meal would come from. And now, my brother, the man who once dripped in designer suits and luxury cars, was here. I stepped out, my heels clicking against the pavement. A part of me almost turned back. What was I expecting? An apology? Some grand confession? No, I knew Daniel too well. He wasn't the type to admit defeat. even with his back against the wall. But I needed to see it for myself. I needed to witness what had become of the man who stole everything from me. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The number on the door matched the one on the napkin. I hesitated for only a second before I knocked Dot. For a moment, nothing. Then, the shuffling of feet. The door cracked open, revealing a sliver of a face I barely recognized. Daniel. He looked hollow. His once perfectly styled hair was unkempt, streaked with gray. The sharp angles of his face had softened, his skin sallow, his eyes sunken. He wasn't wearing one of his expensive tailored suits, just an old wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants that hung loosely on his frame. His eyes widened the second he saw me. "Sophia?" His voice was hoarse, weak. I let the silence stretch between us, let him absorb the weight of my presence. Then I smiled, tilting my head. "You look terrible." Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. He glanced behind him as if expecting someone else to be there, someone to help him. But there was no one. Finally, He exhaled shakily and opened the door wider. "What are you doing here?" I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment was small, cluttered, a far cry from the pristine penthouses he used to flaunt. Empty takeout containers littered the table. Bills, unopened and stacked high, sat in a pile on the counter. The smell of stale air and desperation clung to the walls. I turned to face him, watching the way he fidgeted, his shoulders tense. "I wanted to see you," I said simply. "See how life turned out for you." His jaw tightened. Is that supposed to mean something? I walked past him, letting my fingers skim the dusty counter. "I met with Eleanor." I said it casually, but I saw the way his entire body went rigid. "Sophia." I turned back to him, my expression unreadable. "She told me everything." His face drained of color. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. All these years I thought maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about you. That maybe our father really had changed his mind. That maybe I was just too blinded by my anger to see the truth. I shook my head. "But no, you really did forge the will. You really did steal everything from me." Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch again, watching him squirm under its weight. "And now look at you." I gestured around the apartment. "All that money, all that power. And for what? What do you have left?" He swallowed hard. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I took a step toward him. "You thought you could have it all. You thought you were untouchable. And now, you're nothing." Daniel's breath hitched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "Is that why you came here? To rub it in my face?" I tilted my head. "Maybe." He let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "You have no idea what I've been through." I arched an eyebrow. "And you think I care?" For the first time, real anger flickered in his eyes. "You think you're better than me. You think you're some kind of saint." His voice rose. "You walked away with nothing. And what did you do? You built yourself back up. You made a life. You didn't need the money. You didn't need anything from me." He exhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "I had everything. And I lost it. All of it. And now I have nothing." I let his words hang in the air. He was right. I didn't need his money. I had survived without it. But that wasn't the point, Dot. The point was that he had taken from me, without remorse, without hesitation. And now, life had taken from him. I stared at him for a long moment, and then sighed. "I didn't come here to argue with you, Daniel. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes." His expression wavered, a storm of emotions flashing across his face. "Sophia." But I had nothing left to say. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. Dot. As I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me. "Wait." I paused, but didn't turn around. Do you hate me?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the question sink in, let the weight of it settle over me. Dot finally, I glanced back at him, and for the first time, I saw not the brother who had betrayed me, not the man who had stolen everything, but someone who had already lost far more than I ever could have taken from him. I exhaled slowly. No, Daniel, I don't hate you. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving him behind, Dot. But as I stepped into the cold night air, I realized something, Dot. Maybe I didn't hate him, Dot, but I sure as hell didn't pity him either. I drove in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The address Eleanor had given me led to a part of town I barely recognized. Run-down buildings, flickering streetlights, the kind of place Daniel once would have sneered at. I parked in front of a crumbling apartment complex, the paint peeling from its walls, trash piled up near the entrance. It was a far cry from the sprawling estate we had grown up in, the kind of wealth that ensured we never had to wonder where our next meal would come from. And now, my brother, the man who once dripped in designer suits and luxury cars, was here. I stepped out, my heels clicking against the pavement. A part of me almost turned back. What was I expecting? An apology? Some grand confession? No, I knew Daniel too well. He wasn't the type to admit defeat, even with his back against the wall. But I needed to see it for myself. I needed to witness what had become of the man who stole everything from me. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The number on the door matched the one on the napkin. I hesitated for only a second before I knocked Dot. For a moment, nothing. Then, the shuffling of feet. The door cracked open, revealing a sliver of a face I barely recognized. Daniel. He looked hollow. His once perfectly styled hair was unkempt, streaked with gray. The sharp angles of his face had softened, his skin sallow, his eyes sunken. He wasn't wearing one of his expensive tailored suits, just an old wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants that hung loosely on his frame. His eyes widened the second he saw me. Sophia. His voice was hoarse, weak. I let the silence stretch between us, let him absorb the weight of my presence. Then I smiled, tilting my head. You look terrible. Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. He glanced behind him as if expecting someone else to be there, someone to help him. But there was no one. Finally, He exhaled shakily and opened the door wider. What are you doing here? I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment was small, cluttered, a far cry from the pristine penthouses he used to flaunt. Empty takeout containers littered the table. Bills, unopened and stacked high, sat in a pile on the counter. The smell of stale air and desperation clung to the walls. I turned to face him, watching the way he fidgeted, his shoulders tense. I wanted to see you, I said simply. See how life turned out for you. His jaw tightened. Is that supposed to mean something? I walked past him, letting my fingers skim the dusty counter. I met with Eleanor. I said it casually, but I saw the way his entire body went rigid. Sophia. I turned back to him, my expression unreadable. She told me everything, his face drained of color. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. All these years, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about you, that maybe our father really had changed his mind, that maybe I was just too blinded by my anger to see the truth. I shook my head. But no, you really did forge the will. You really did steal everything from me. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. I let the silence stretch again, watching him squirm under its weight. And now look at you. I gestured around the apartment. All that money, all that power, and for what? What do you have left? He swallowed hard. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I took a step toward him. You thought you could have it all. You thought you were untouchable. And now? You're nothing. Daniel's breath hitched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. Is that why you came here? To rub it in my face? I tilted my head. Maybe. He let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. You have no idea what I've been through. I arched an eyebrow. And you think I care. For the first time, real anger flickered in his eyes. You think you're better than me? You think you're some kind of saint? His voice rose. You walked away with nothing, and what did you do? You built yourself back up. You made a life. You didn't need the money. You didn't need anything from me. He exhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling rapidly. I had everything, and I lost it. All of it. And now I have nothing. I let his words hang in the air. He was right. I didn't need his money. I had survived without it. But that wasn't the point, Dot. The point was that he had taken from me, without remorse, without hesitation. And now, life had taken from him. I stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. I didn't come here to argue with you, Daniel. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. His expression wavered, a storm of emotions flashing across his face. Sophia. But I had nothing left to say. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. Dot, as I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me. Wait. I paused, but didn't turn around. Do you hate me? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the question sink in, let the weight of it settle over me. Dot, finally, I glanced back at him, and for the first time, I saw not the brother who had betrayed me, not the man who had stolen everything, but someone who had already lost far more than I ever could have taken from him. I exhaled slowly. No, Daniel, I don't hate you. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving him behind Dot. But as I stepped into the cold night air, I realized something, Dot. Maybe I didn't hate him, Dot, but I sure as hell didn't pity him either. I didn't want to see him again. I had walked away once, and that should have been the end of it. But Daniel's voice haunted me, the way it wavered, the hesitation in his words, Dot. What more could he possibly have to say? I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that it didn't matter, that whatever secrets he was holding on to were irrelevant. The past was the past, and I had already made peace with it. Or at least, that's what I told myself, Dot. But by evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unfinished, that if I ignored this, I would always wonder. Dot so against my better judgment. I called him back, Dot. He picked up on the first ring. You came, he said, as if he hadn't been sure I would. I haven't come anywhere yet, I replied. You left a cryptic voicemail. If you want to say something, say it now. A pause. Not over the phone, I exhaled sharply. Daniel, please, Sophia. His voice was barely above a whisper. I don't have much time. I frowned. What does that mean? Just meet me. Same place. I clenched my jaw. Every instinct told me to hang up, to end this once and for all, Dot. But curiosity, damn curiosity, had its claws in me now. Fine. I hung up before he could say anything else. I arrived at his apartment later that night, the air thick with the kind of tension that made my skin crawl. I knocked, but this time there was no hesitation. The door swung open immediately. Daniel looked even worse than before. His hands trembled as he motioned me inside. The apartment smelled stale, like he hadn't bothered to open a window in weeks. I crossed my arms. Talk! He shut the door, locking it behind him. I need you to hear me out before you say anything, he said, his voice tight. Because once you know, you can't unknow it. I narrowed my eyes. Just get to the point. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I forged the will, yes, but not because I wanted to, because I had to. I scoffed. You stole my inheritance, Daniel. There was no had to. He swallowed hard. Dad was in trouble. I stilled. What? He turned away, staring at the wall like he couldn't face me. The business wasn't as stable as you thought. He was in debt, millions. He had made deals with people he shouldn't have. People who don't let things go. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What are you saying? He finally looked at me, his eyes hollow. He was being blackmailed. If he didn't come up with the money, they were going to ruin him. Worse. So he changed the will, left everything to me. Because he thought I could handle it. My mind reeled. You're lying. He shook his head. I wish I was. I took a step back. And what? You spent the money instead of fixing things, buying cars and vacations while our father's debt swallowed everything. His face twisted with something between guilt and bitterness. I tried, but it was never enough. And by the time I realized how deep he was in, it was too late. The business collapsed. The money was gone. And they came for me instead. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Who? He didn't answer, but the haunted look in his eyes told me everything. Daniel, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Are you in danger? He let out a breathless, humorless laugh. I've been in danger for years. The air in the apartment suddenly felt suffocating. I had come here expecting closure, expecting to find a broken man desperate for sympathy. Instead, I had found something much worse. I had found the truth. And it terrified me. I wanted to walk out. I should have walked out. But my feet remained planted, my pulse thudding in my ears, as Daniel's words replayed in my mind. He was in danger. Had been for years. And suddenly, all the missing pieces of the past started clicking into place. The hushed arguments I overheard between him and my father in the months before his death. The way our father seemed more exhausted than ever, shadows darkening his eyes. How quickly Daniel moved after his passing, securing the will, taking everything, shutting me out without a second thought. I had assumed it was greed, that he had seen an opportunity and taken it. But now I wasn't sure what to think. Daniel ran a hand over his face, exhaling shakily. I didn't call you to ask for help. I know that's the last thing you'd ever want to give me. He sat down heavily on the arm of his worn-out couch, staring at the floor. But you deserve to know. I screwed up, Sophia. I thought I could fix things. I thought I could keep us safe. Instead, I made everything worse. My jaw tightened. How much worse? His mouth opened slightly, but then his eyes darted past me toward the window. A flicker of something. Paranoia, fear, passed over his face, and suddenly he was on his feet. Never mind, he muttered. You should go. I narrowed my eyes. Excuse me. You shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have called you. He moved toward the door, unlocking it in a rush. Just go, Sophia. Forget I said anything. Panic twisted in my gut. Daniel, what's going on? He grabbed my wrist, his grip clammy but firm. Leave. Now. And that's when I heard it. A car engine idling just outside Dot. Daniel stiffened, his eyes flickering toward the door like he was expecting it to be kicked in at any moment. Fear coiled in my stomach. What did you do? I whispered. He didn't answer, just shoved me toward the exit. If you ever trusted me, even for a second, listen to me now. Go, don't look back. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, But then I saw his hands, They were shaking, Not from nerves, not from guilt, from terror, And in that moment, I knew, whatever Daniel had gotten himself into, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, And if I didn't leave now, I might not get another chance. I turned and stepped out into the hallway, forcing myself not to look back. As I reached the stairwell, I heard Daniel lock the door behind me, Then, just as I stepped outside, I caught a glimpse of a black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, watching. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering against my ribs as I forced myself to walk calmly to my car. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they wanted, Dot. But I knew one thing for sure, Dot. This wasn't over. I didn't go straight home. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, every nerve in my body screaming at me to get as far away as possible. But instead of turning toward my apartment, I drove aimlessly, trying to steady my breathing, trying to process what had just happened. Dot, Daniel wasn't just broke. He wasn't just desperate. He was afraid, Dot. And if he was afraid, that meant I should be too. I checked my rearview mirror instinctively. The streets were dark, mostly empty, but paranoia had sunk its claws into me now. Was I being followed? Was I in danger just for showing up? I pulled into an all-night diner, parking in the back where the cameras would catch my car just in case. My phone felt like a dead weight in my pocket. I had a dozen questions rattling around in my head, but I wasn't sure who I could even ask, Dot. Calling the police was pointless. What would I even say? That my estranged brother had confessed to some vague but ominous crime, and now there was a mystery car watching his apartment? No. If Daniel had been tangled up in something criminal for years, then the authorities either already knew or wouldn't be much help. I ordered a cup of coffee, barely drinking it as I stared out the window, my mind racing, Dot. My father had been in trouble. Daniel had taken everything to protect us. And now he was unraveling, afraid for his life, Dot. Was it possible that our father's death hadn't been natural? That maybe the pressure, the threats, had been worse than I ever realized? And if that was the case, a cold chill crept down my spine. Dot, had Daniel just sealed his own fate by reaching out to me? I pulled out my phone, hovering over his number. I wanted to call him to demand he tell me everything, but then I hesitated. Dot, what if calling him made things worse? I clenched my jaw. I wasn't about to let fear control me. If something deeper was going on, I needed to know the truth. Dot, just as I was about to press dial, a notification popped up. Dot, one new voicemail. I frowned. My stomach twisted as I tapped to play it. Dot. At first, all I heard was silence. Then, heavy breathing. A shuffle of movement, Dot. And then Daniel's voice, barely above a whisper. Sophia, I think I made a mistake. A crash in the background, a muffled curse, Dot, and then a sound that made my blood run cold. A knock. 3 sharp raps against what I could only assume was his apartment door. Daniel's breathing quickened. The phone rustled, as if he had moved to press himself against a wall, Dot. Then the last words he ever said to me. If anything happens to me, find Eleanor. The line went dead. I sat there, frozen, the diner suddenly too bright, too loud, too suffocating. Dot, Eleanor, Dot. The lawyer who had contacted me about the will, Dot. What did she know? I swallowed hard, my heart hammering as I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door. I didn't know what had happened to Daniel, Dot, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. I barely remembered the drive to Eleanor's house. My hands were slick with sweat, my mind racing through a dozen worst-case scenarios. The voicemail played over and over in my head, Daniel's final words looping like a bad omen. Dot, if anything happens to me, find Eleanor. I didn't want to believe the worst, but deep down I already knew. Something had happened to him. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was tangled in whatever nightmare he had been trying to escape. Eleanor's house was in an older, quiet neighborhood, one of those places where the trees were overgrown, the houses set far back from the road, giving it an eerie stillness at night. I parked a few houses down and killed the engine, my eyes scanning the street, Dot. No cars. No signs of movement. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the steering wheel. Was I being paranoid? Or had Daniel's fear infected me, making me see threats in every shadow? I shook the thought away. There was only one way to find out. I stepped out and walked up to her door, my heart pounding harder with every step. I knocked once, Dot, then twice. Nothing. I exhaled sharply, glancing around before knocking again. Harder this time. Dot, finally, I heard footsteps. Slow, cautious. Then the door cracked open just an inch, the security chain still latched. Eleanor's face appeared in the dim light, her sharp eyes scanning me. "Sophia." Her voice was wary. I nodded quickly. "I need to talk to you. It's about Daniel." She hesitated. Then, without a word, she shut the door, only to unlatch it a second later and pull it open. I stepped inside. Her house smelled like old books and strong tea, the air thick with something unspoken. She led me to the living room, motioning for me to sit on the worn leather couch, while she perched on the armchair across from me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice level but guarded. I swallowed hard. "Daniel left me a voicemail. He said if anything happened to him, I should find you." Her face didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "He's in trouble," I continued. My voice caught in my throat. Saying it out loud made it feel more real. "I think something happened to him." Eleanor exhaled, rubbing a hand over her temple. I was afraid of this. A chill ran through me. Afraid of what? She looked at me then. Really looked at me, like she was weighing something. Then she stood up and crossed the room, pulling a file from a drawer. "I never told you the full truth," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't know if I should. But if Daniel reached out to you, then I don't have a choice anymore." She handed me the file. I flipped it open, my eyes scanning the first page. And that's when I saw it, a second one, that left everything to me. My breath caught. "What?" Eleanor sat back down, her expression grim. "Your father never changed his will, Sophia. He always intended for you to inherit half. But someone—" She hesitated. "Someone made sure that never happened." I stared at the document, my pulse roaring in my ears. Everything I thought I knew had just shattered. Daniel hadn't just stolen from me. He had lied about everything. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages. The will was dated just a few months before my father's death, clear as day with his signature at the bottom. Half of everything, his assets, his business, his estate, was meant to be mine, not Daniel's. Eleanor sat in silence, watching me absorb the truth. The truth that Daniel hadn't just stolen from me. He had erased me from my own inheritance. I looked up, my throat dry. "How long have you known?" Eleanor exhaled, rubbing her temples. "I suspected it for a while, but I didn't have proof until recently. After your father's death, I was pushed out of handling the estate. Daniel brought in his own legal team, and they presented the new will, the one that cut you out completely. But something about it never sat right with me. I gritted my teeth. Because it was forged." She nodded grimly. "It took me years to track down the real document. I had to go through old case files, storage archives, places Daniel never thought to look. I finally found it a few months ago." She gestured to the file in my lap. "That's why I reached out to you." My stomach twisted. A few months ago, right around the time Daniel's life had started crumbling. I sucked in a sharp breath. "He knew, didn't he?" Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "I sent him a letter, a warning that the truth was coming out. I wanted to give him a chance to come clean, to do the right thing, before I took legal action." I clenched my jaw. "That's why he called me Dot. Not because he suddenly felt remorse. Not because he wanted to make amends. Because he was scared. Because he knew the walls were closing in." I shot to my feet, my pulse hammering. "If you had proof, why didn't you go to the authorities? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Eleanor's gaze darkened. "Because this isn't just about Daniel." I froze. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Your father's death. It wasn't as simple as you think." A chill ran through me. "Are you saying—" She nodded, her expression grim. "I think he was murdered." The words hit me like a blow. Murdered my father. I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense. He had health issues, but—" "He was under extreme pressure," Eleanor interrupted. The business was facing threats, lawsuits. There were people who wanted him gone. And Daniel? She exhaled. I believe he was part of it. My mind reeled. You think Daniel had something to do with our father's death? Eleanor didn't answer right away. But the look in her eyes said enough. I felt sick. My entire life had been built on lies, on betrayals I hadn't even begun to understand, Dot. And now, Daniel was gone, Dot. But not before leaving me with the mess he had created. A mess that someone, whoever had been watching his apartment tonight, didn't want uncovered, Dot. My breath came fast and shallow. If Daniel really knew something, then whoever came after him might come after me next. Eleanor nodded solemnly. That's why you need to be careful, Sophia. You're the last loose end. My blood ran cold. I wasn't just chasing the truth anymore. I was running for my life, Dot. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the heavy, suffocating stillness that comes before a storm. Daniel's face was pale, his once arrogant smirk long gone. He sat at the defendant's table, his hands clenched together, his expensive suit hanging loosely on him, like he had already shrunk under the weight of his own downfall, Dot. The judge's voice echoed through the room. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that the will was fraudulently altered, and the rightful inheritance belongs to Sophia Carter. A murmur spread through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously, their cameras flashing, capturing the exact moment Daniel's world collapsed. I felt nothing. No joy, no triumph, just a cold satisfaction as I watched my brother, the man who had stolen my future, realize that his own had just been destroyed, Dot. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, due to the fraudulent actions taken to falsify legal documents, along with the mismanagement of funds from the Carter estate, Daniel Carter is hereby sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Daniel's head snapped up. No, this isn't. His voice broke as the bailiff stepped forward, pulling him to his feet. Dot. His lawyer, who had fought tooth and nail to delay the inevitable, simply sighed and shook his head. There was no way out now. Daniel turned toward me, his eyes wild with desperation. Sophia, please! I tilted my head, letting him stew in the same helplessness I had felt years ago. The betrayal, the despair, the feeling of losing everything because someone else decided you didn't deserve it. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You finally know what it feels like. His mouth opened, but no words came. Only regret, only panic, Dot. The bailiffs pulled him away, his expensive shoes scraping against the floor. I watched until the doors shut behind him. Dot, with Daniel gone, the truth unraveled like a broken thread. His fraudulent activities had stretched far beyond my inheritance. He had stolen from business partners, falsified financial records, and left behind a tangled mess of debts and broken alliances. His name, once synonymous with success, became a curse. His so-called friends abandoned him overnight. His luxury cars, his penthouse, his offshore accounts, seized. For years, Daniel had lived in a world of power and deceit, convinced he would never face consequences. He had always believed he was untouchable. Now, he had nothing. And I had everything back. I took my rightful place as co-owner of my father's company. The board had initially been hesitant. After all, I had spent years on the outside, forced to build my own path. But it turned out that surviving betrayal, starting from nothing, and clawing my way back, had given me something Daniel never had. Resilience. I knew what it meant to fight for what was mine. And unlike my brother, I didn't destroy everything I touched. I rebuilt the company in my own vision, one of integrity, of fairness. The damage Daniel had done would take years to repair, but I was patient. I had already waited a lifetime for justice. A's for Daniel. His time behind bars was only the beginning. His release wouldn't bring him freedom. It would bring him humiliation. The world had seen him fall. There was no coming back from that. One day I received a letter from him. Dosti. The envelope was wrinkled. The handwriting rushed. Inside, a single note. I'm sorry. I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Dot. Not out of anger. Not out of hatred, Dot. But because I had already moved on. I stood in my father's office. The place that should have been mine from the beginning. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. I ran my fingers along the smooth surface, breathing in the weight of what I had fought for. Dot Eleanor stood beside me, a satisfied glint in her eyes. So, she said, was it worth it? I smiled. Not the bitter smile of someone who had lost too much, but the quiet smile of someone who had reclaimed what was theirs. Justice always comes, I murmured, one way or another.